and hit record. And you should get a little notification that will allow you to accept it or to not. So we'll make sure to send out the recording to this afterwards because I know it's a lot of information to cover, especially for folks who are also interested in youth healing projects, since these two are very similar, though a little different. And so it might be helpful just to review the recording later so that there's no mix-ups or confusion. So getting into this, my name is Michaela. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the program manager for the Community Wellbeing Initiative out of Best Starts for Kids in Public Health. I'm super excited to be joining you all today and to be talking about this amazing project. And I will be very honest in saying I am also equally enthused for this one, similar to the one that we just went over. I love youth-led projects. I also really, really like social media a lot to the point where it might be a little bit of a problem. So I think there's a lot that we can do with this project. So I'm really excited just to share that with you all. So a brief overview of what we'll be covering for today. And before we get into all this, I would say to anyone who's new, who wasn't on the call last time, definitely feel free to post in the chat, like what brought you here, what you're excited about with this particular opportunity. If it's youth voice, that's totally okay too. If it's communications, also wonderful. But for today, what we'll be doing is going over what Best Starts for Kids is. We'll talk about the Community Wellbeing Initiative, and then go into the details of this RFP. So for anyone who was present for the last information session, the last open house session, this may feel very repetitive. My apologies for that. We just want to make sure that we're covering all this information, especially for folks who are viewing this recording so that they have access to all of this as well. So in terms of logistics, things to be aware of, you can use the chat feature. We also have those little handy reactions, so you can always raise your hand as well if you have questions, or feel free to unmute yourself. I know the agenda says you can ask questions towards the end, but I also encourage people to ask questions during as well, just to clarify anything or any questions you may have as they're rising up. Especially because I know that if you have a question, that I imagine there are probably other people on that call who also have the same question. You can all also email me as well. And my email should be in the chat or will be reposted in the chat for any questions you may have. Because I know that sometimes maybe this question didn't come up during the presentation, but maybe it'll come up later where you're like, oh, wait a second, actually, I am kind of wondering about this particular nuance, or especially if you're able to have conversations internally within your organization and you want more details around something. And now is the perfect time to ask any questions you all may have, since the RFP is still in the process of being developed and has not yet been released. That gives me a chance to be able to answer any of your questions you may have a little more thoroughly than I would be able to do if the RFP was out. So now is your perfect time just to learn anything directly from me. I'll also say, let me actually just pause too and say that Erin, who's also on the call, I don't know if you wanted to introduce yourself since you are more involved in this one than the last one that we were talking about.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Erin Fenner. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Best Starts for Kids communication specialist on the 5 to 24 strategies. And yeah, I'm very happy to be supporting on this RFP because I just think some of the most powerful stories that we tell are stories that come directly from community. Okay, I'll rephrase that. The most powerful stories we tell are the ones that come directly from community. So I'll put my email in the chat as well.
Yes, Erin is an amazing resource and would be incredibly helpful for this particular RFP, just given her work experience and also the role she's played in developing the RFP. So definitely use both of us as a resource for any questions you all may have. Yeah, but let's go ahead and dive into it. So Best Starts for Kids and who we are. So our vision really is to ensure that our communities are happy, healthy, safe, and thriving. Our work is focused on babies, children, and youth, but we also recognize that there are ripple effects. Just being able to invest in young people and children and babies impacts not just them, but also the community as a whole. So we really want to make sure that we're seeing babies born healthy, kids thriving, and young people growing up to be happy, healthy, successful adults. We truly believe that. And so our mission, like just building on this, is really to strengthen our families and communities, right? And so there are some initiatives or focuses within Best Starts for Kids that actually are more focused on community as a whole, which I think is beautiful, that we're able to really use that holistic wraparound approach to our work. And so we really are focused on ensuring there's a strong foundation for life and that young people are growing into happy, healthy adults who are supported. Additionally, part of Best Starts for Kids as well that we really try to center is equity. And so we have the Children and Youth Advisory Board, which is our oversight board to ensure accountability and to ensure that we're really not just saying things, but actually really practicing what it is that we preach. So equity is an ardent journey. It is difficult, but it is a journey towards well-being, and it should be defined by people who are most impacted by that issue. Equity can be disruptive. It can be uncomfortable. Sometimes it might not even feel voluntary, but I think what's important to note is that it is foundational to the communities that we want to build. And so this is why we center the communities that we do, because we really recognize that their voices matter, that we have to center people who have been most impacted by disproportional systems in order to really be able to right the wrongs that we're seeing and that we have seen within our community. And so there's more information about the full statement. I encourage you all, if you're interested in learning more about our equity values and principles, to look more into the Children Youth Advisory Board and also just our equity statement and values. Especially because I know in terms of the topic of equity and who we choose to focus on, sometimes there can be some confusion, but we really do try to focus on the communities that we know just based off of data and storytelling that really need that extra support. So in terms of our principles and our approach, we really are grounded in promotion and prevention and our early intervention and policy and systems change, which is huge. There are not a lot of initiatives or groups that really focus on promotion and prevention. We're often used to seeing that deep intervention when people have already been impacted, when they're already in distress. And so our goal really is to start early on, which I really, really love as a social worker who has worked in deep intervention strategies and have asked that question in the past of, why aren't we intervening sooner? Or why aren't we really trying to figure out how to prevent these things from happening to people? And so we are asking ourselves, what are the good things that we can do for our children? How can we prioritize promotion and invest early in babies and young children? Because we truly believe that every child is born full of possibilities and deserving of good things. And I also believe that I think that all people generally are full of possibilities and deserving of good things. So we recognize that children and young people, they need those prevention supports in order to establish that strong foundation. And we recognize too that yes, a lot of what we talk about is intervening early, but we also want to sustain those gains that we're investing in early. So we want to intervene early and provide supports. And so when we say sustain the gain, we really mean like, how do we ensure that young people who, are past the age of 5 are also being supported? And how can we not just look at the individual impact, but also look at that change on a systemic and policy level so that all of our communities are able to thrive and prosper, regardless of race or whatever place they may live in. We're really focused on that strength-based approach. And so this is just a lot of what underpins our work. And just knowing that you all will probably notice elements of that embedded in any of our RFPs or projects that we're working on as a strategy, which is phenomenal and very, very cool. And I will say I definitely am nerding out about that. That's just one of my interests. I truly like reading about these sort of things inside and outside of work, which works in my favor. So going into more detail around Best Starts for Kids, I'm sure all of you are familiar with us and are aware that we are based on the tax levy that we were voter approved, which we are so thankful to our community for choosing to invest in children and youth and families and to invest these funds and to say that, yes, we do believe in prevention and promotion work and we do want to see children thrive. So it is a property tax that is a 6-year property tax. The overall cost for each individual is not particularly high. If it was a $600,000 house, it would just be $114 overall. And our projected revenue is 879 million overall. And so that is a large amount, which makes sense because we are a very large county. There are a lot of houses that exist in King County. And so that total dollar amount goes up to be a pretty decent amount, which helps us to be able to better support our communities. And so where is that money going? It's going to so many different things that are all important and incredibly valuable for our communities. There's childcare, which is very new. And so for anyone familiar with Best Starts for Kids 1.0, we were much smaller. We were still trying out some new things and only had a couple of strategy areas, but we've since expanded to include some new ones like childcare and capital projects and homelessness prevention, that data evaluation support and that TA and capacity building, which I can talk a little bit more about soon. But all of that to say that there is definitely a lot of different things that we're doing. And our particular body of work lies in that sustain to gain areas, that 5 to 24. That is where we're located and where this particular RFP and funding opportunity is located. So that is just an overview of what BSK is, what we do, what our values are, and why we do what we do. So let me pause just to see if there are any questions, any thoughts, before I jump into describing more what the Community Wellbeing Initiative is. I definitely encourage folks to use the chat if there's anything that's coming up at all at any point. But the Community Wellbeing Initiative got its starts out of COVID-19 response. So we actually are very new to BSK. We are part of BSK 2.0, but we actually started a little bit before BSK 2.0. Our staff at the time were focused on COVID-19 response and really supporting community. And in early 2020, we were aware that the COVID-19 pandemic could be potentially traumatic and like that we should start to intervene and really figure out what can we do early on to support community. And so the Community Wellbeing Initiative was dreamed up, not by me since I was not working at the county at the time, but by someone else, by another staff member. But what we decided to do was to focus on community, to use a more holistic approach. And so the Community Wellbeing Initiative builds community capacity to share resources and deliver culturally relevant programming on emotional health and well-being. And our overall goal around that is really to reduce that stigma that we see associated with mental health. It's really try to reinforce compassion, connection, and care. So really taking that strengths-based approach once again. We recognize that emotional health is grounded in holistic individual and community health, but also in just and equitable systems and structures. And so we do this by reducing stigma, by reinforcing that compassion and care, and partnering with community and convening different groups and stakeholders to really discuss the emotional well-being, emotional health of young people. And so one thing I love about the Community Wellbeing Initiative that's honestly amazing is that we are able to really embed ourselves in community. And so some of you may have seen our work through groups like the South King Emotional Wellness League, where we're a major partner and are able to support individuals in getting access to free mental health support through our virtual mental health support events, and also to have conversations around mental health and well-being as well, and other things. So we are doing all sorts of work in a variety of ways to really address mental health needs for young people, which is beautiful that we're able to do that. So that was just a little bit about the Community Wellbeing Initiative. I encourage folks who have any questions about our work outside of this RFP to definitely email me to learn more, because we do have access to an amazing group of BIPOC providers that we work with, and they're an amazing resource to have, especially for our communities. But just going into who this RFP is for anyone who has heard about the Youth Healing Project, that one is specifically focused on young people applying. This one is for organizations to apply. Both projects are still very much focused on youth leadership, but using different approaches. So we want authentic community voice, and we want organizations that have experience supporting young people and leading projects and fostering youth voice. Because I think in order for this project to succeed, we really need to make sure that the organizations are directly connected to community and that they understand how to work directly with young people. Additionally, we would love to see organizations that have experience working with historically marginalized communities, because this overall project, our goal is to make sure we're reaching groups that have traditionally not been reached or groups that traditionally have not been prioritized. And we also want to see demonstrated experience in social media / communications work. And that can look like a variety of ways, which we'll definitely get into more. But let me just pause to see what particular questions may be coming up around this RFP. Yeah. And there will be more details that we'll get into in the next few slides too, for any questions that anyone may have. But overall, this particular project can be one org, it could be a collection of organizations. But overall, we want to really make sure this is a community-oriented project that authentically centers community voice. And so, what is the Youth-Led Communications Campaign? Because I know that we haven't really dived into what it is. And it is so helpful to have that context about who we are, what we're doing, what this looks like. So we know it's underneath the Community Wellbeing Initiative. And very much youth-led, but the Youth-Led Communications Campaign was developed with the value and understanding that peer-to-peer messaging is a powerful tool for community to support in community health and well-being. And so our overall goal with this particular RFP is to support a CBO in being able to launch a youth-led communications campaign focused on mental health and well-being, which I think is amazing. So when we say mental health and well-being, when we say social media, what we really mean is it could look like a lot of different things. It could be young people creating an Instagram account that's targeted specifically towards their peers and has innovative mental health posts and solutions and ideas and things. It could look like young people choosing to create TikTok accounts if they choose to do that. And so it can be all sorts of things. But the reason why we are choosing to create an RFP centered around this is one, because we know that us as government would not be able to do as good of a job in this particular project, especially because it should really be embedded in community and coming from community-based organizations and youth leaders themselves. And so this project is located underneath the Community Wellbeing Initiative, us, but underneath that Liberation and Healing Strategy and Sustain the Gain, so that 5 to 24 age range. And so this project will be focused on young people and youth and young adults. And we really want to make sure that it centers BSK values and is really focused on that prevention and promotion strategy. So not necessarily posts that are saying things like, for an example, I could think of, it wouldn't be necessarily focused on heavy interventions, but it would be more focused on holistic well-being and support. The post would be. And so overall goals for this funding really is to support that promotion of social, emotional, and mental health for young people, but also to really reduce stigma and to really open up the door for young people to be able to communicate and talk about mental health and well-being, but also to have resources that they can share with one another too, and to be able to have these healthy conversations. I know that social media often gets a bad reputation, which makes sense. It can be impactful on people's mental health, but we also know that social media can be an amazing resource and powerful tool for young people too. And so we really want to utilize it and really take that strength-based approach and reach our communities directly. And so I'm really, really excited about this project because there's so many amazing, creative, really cool things that folks could do with it to really just be able to support young people and to see young people also posting on social media. So informing the campaign, this is just a quick little graphic around the background of this project to give you all more context and how it came about. But we were able to work with a student intern to do a landscape assessment and some focus groups. And so the landscape assessment, what they basically were able to learn was like what the current campaigns and communication strategies were that we were seeing. And what type of platforms young people are utilizing. And there were a lot that we learned from that, like just different things that people may see on social media. We also were able to learn more about a particular project at Public Health and an organization called SOAR, which I had worked with during that particular campaign, had done. around youth communications campaigns. In that particular campaign that we learned about called the Social Media Ambassadors, was specifically focused on messaging around COVID-19, though it did also address and talk about topics of mental health and well-being. And so what we learned was that with government collaborating and really just offering support, but having the project itself be housed in the CBO just made a lot of sense. It's often the best way to really go about this work. Additionally, that project was very much collaboratory by nature. So it wasn't just one organization that was working on it. It was a collection of groups, 4 separate orgs, if I remember correctly, probably more. Additionally, what we learned from the focus groups from young people was that they really value authenticity. So it cannot be a person that they cannot connect with who just feels unrelatable. It needs to be folks who are from their community, people who have similar experiences, people that they trust, basically individuals. Is what they noted, that they really want to make sure they could tell if it's something that feels like it's an information campaign. So no, it would not work to do a traditional public health messaging campaign on social media. They would not really tune into it. But if it was something that was coming from their peers, they noted that it would work wonderfully, that they would be more responsive to it, that they would enjoy that. And so for whatever organization that does get this funding, what I will say is that we will make sure to share just more information around that landscape assessment, those focus groups, so you all have access to that as well, because we want to make sure that this is a successful project and that we're really honoring what we learned from the young people who really helped to inform the overall strategy for this RFP and for the project itself. But let me pause to see what questions folks have before we get into details around the actual logistics, the summary about the RFP. Like any questions on like, when we say social media, what that means, or like if you all just have particular questions around who should apply, or like just thought maybe.
I'd like to hear more on who should apply.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Did you have like thoughts around like, and actually let me pause there. So in terms of who would apply, I think that that's something that a lot of, that we've been having conversations about internally to figure out. The answer to that is honestly a 501c3 in King County. Those are just the basic parameters. But we do encourage organizations that are authentically connected to community to apply. And if you have experience with social media platforms or with youth leadership also as well, I think where it gets tricky with this particular project, and we'll go into that a little bit more in a few slides, is that it is okay if like maybe a few organizations are like, actually, we'd like to collaborate on this together, because this seems like it would be a lot for all of us, for just one organization to do. So this opportunity could be collaborative, it could be one org. It really just depends on what makes the most sense. We want to leave it open for you all to figure out like what would be a good approach. And so we're not married to the idea of it just being one org or 3 orgs. It could be anything in between. It could be all of it. Because we just want to make sure that this project is successful overall, and that it could be the best version of itself that it could be.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there other questions around that before I get into some of the more details around the actual RFP itself? So let me go ahead and move to this next slide. So you'll notice I put tentative there. And the rationale behind that is this will be most likely collaborative funding. Right now, we are the main ones holding it. And so this is what we have allocated, partly because we are very new to BSK. We are a small strategy. We're meant to collaborate with others. And so our budget is not quite as big as some of our other strategy areas. But we recognize that that number could shift. So I would say, do not let that number deter you in any way, because most likely within the next couple of weeks, it'll probably shift just based off conversations we've been having internally. We are planning to release the RFP sometime this summer, but the application will be due sometime in September, just based off of timeline. And the contract period will go from October to December. And we are awarding one organization. So I know that a lot of BSK projects typically will award multiple. For this particular one, it's just for one. And the reason behind that is because we're just overall trying to focus on the project itself, which is how do we launch this huge social media campaign to reach young people. It's okay if we find that it's multiple organizations working on this project, but it'll still just be one award. So it might look like maybe there's one org that takes the lead and then there are some subcontractees. But these are just some of the details. And so the contract period will go from October through next year. So it'll be a little over a year. Because we know it will take a little bit just to get the project set up, to bring in young people to help with the social media project, to make sure that your staff are prepared to work on this project. But this is just the overall time frame. So we know that this project, most likely people will probably not see it until 2023, like externally. But that's just some of the numbers. And so moving forward in terms of the timeline, we're planning to release this at the end of July. We're staggering it so that it's not released exactly at the same time as the other youth-led RFP we're doing so that no one is confused. And we'll do our information session sometime in August as well. There will be technical assistance to help with applying to the RFP, and I encourage you all to utilize that technical assistance. Our technical assistance providers are amazing. They're incredibly helpful, and we know that this project is a little different than some of the other RFPs that you all may be used to seeing. And so technical assistance will be very, very helpful in terms of just being able to like work through some of the questions and think through some of the things. The RFP will be due in September, and we will go through a traditional RFP review process, and we'll notify folks in early October. The contract discussions should not take as long as they typically do, since we will just be awarding one organization. Or collection, we won't be doing multiple grantees the way that projects typically are done with Best Starts for Kids. Are there any questions around this timeline or any of those details that I've shared so far? Okay, so let me go ahead and go to the next slide then. So in terms of funding priorities and what we're trying to prioritize, this is flexible. I have been a program manager and I've also been a grant writer in 501c3s before. And so I know the pain of dealing with a funding source that is very, very restrictive, and that sometimes it can get in the way of that project actually being able to be done. So overall, the funding will be flexible, but what we do want to make sure is happening is that it is aligned with our goals to engage in mental health promotion and prevention work for young people through social media channels. So these are just some examples of how funding can be used. It could be that maybe it's youth stipends or incentives. Maybe it's also staff time. It could be supplies, materials, operational costs. It can really vary. But overall, just making sure that the RFP in the budget section is just focused on the priorities and that there's a clear rationale behind cost. But we'll be really more focused on the actual outcomes and actual goals. Going into outcomes in more detail as well, with data and evaluation, we will make sure that the provider participates in building a measurement and evaluation plan with BSK staff. And we're very, very intentional about that because evaluation for this particular project will be very interesting and can look very unique. It could be maybe you're capturing social media metrics with young people and you're tracking hashtag engagement, or maybe there is an emphasis on how often a link is clicked on that social media page. So maybe that's what most of the evaluation would look like if you were to lead this particular project. It could also look like maybe we're doing survey engagement and collecting surveys from young people who are engaging with the communications campaign or leading the communications campaign. It's going to be very flexible and really just tied to, is this going to measure the outcomes that we hope to see? So you'll receive support from BSK internally. Of course, we do have staff, dedicated evaluation staff who do help out with these particular pieces. So yes, you will be required to collect this data, but we promise it will be a very collaborative process. It will not be something that we would make too high barrier, because we really, at the end of the day, want to make sure that we're giving these funds to an organization that is deeply connected to and invested in community and in youth leadership. And so we don't want the evaluation requirements to be some kind of barrier, because that wouldn't be good. But if you do have more questions about these expected outcomes that we're hoping to reach, we do have a whole entire section in the RFP called outcomes that goes into more detail around what outcomes we're hoping for. And they're very like general on purpose. Like we are not setting the specific numbers because we really want to collaborate with whoever receives these funds, and also want to make sure that the young people who are working on these projects are also having a say in what it could look like. So that it is authentic to youth leadership and youth voice. So yes, this is just a little bit about the evaluation and the data requirements. And I know for anyone who's ever received funding from Best Starts for Kids that the evaluation can be a lot, but we promise for this particular project, we will try to make it as accessible as possible. In terms of RFP review and rating, I would advise that you all carefully review the rating criteria so that you can make sure that you are aligned with it. Our review panel will be composed of various folks, including community members, individuals who work within the county, subject matter experts, that sort of thing. And they will make sure to closely follow that scoring rubric. So a successful proposal will be one that really is aligned with just the scoring rubric and what it is that we're looking for. And so all proposals will go through this formal review process. We're very intentional about it. In the appeals process, like if you want to know why you received a score that you did, is outlined in the RFP so that we can make sure that we're just being accountable and transparent since we are a public entity. So that's just a little bit about the RFP review. But overall, our RFP review process is very thorough, and all of our RFP review panel members are trained in equity and how to assess applications, not based off of just how good the writer is, but specifically, is this an organization that would be a good fit? Is this an organization that is tied to community and trustworthy and able to manage funds? So for the application tips, I would say, please be sure to read the instructions. Sometimes there's some nuances or details, and it is okay if you need help because there's only so much that we can write. There might be things that get lost a little bit. It might be easy to like misunderstand that particular thing. I encourage you all to actually ask questions because I know that I often have questions and I sometimes don't like to reach out for help. But I think it's important to do so. And we do have those TA providers who really do want to be a resource and do want to help folks. I also encourage you all to be creative. Like we welcome innovative projects. We want things that are community led. We want it to be flexible. We want it to be fun and authentic. We're not looking for something that's strict and rigid. That's like, I am going to do social media in XYZ way. We're really looking for something that we know is going to be a success and that is really tied to community and also really utilizes that strength-based approach. So we encourage small groups, like maybe your organization is one that is fiscally sponsored by a larger organization. That's okay, go for it, still apply. You don't have to be a big, massive organization that's been around for decades. Maybe you're a collective, maybe you're grassroots. Maybe you and your friend from the other organization want to apply together so that you all can collaborate in this project. And I would say, yes, please do. Some of the best projects I've worked on in my work has been collaborating with others. In fact, you all may notice that this particular RFP most likely is collaborative because we will be receiving support from other entities, and the other RFP, the Youth Healing Project that we talked about in the other session is also collaborative. We know that working together, it works well. It makes a lot of sense to do that, especially capacity wise. So we encourage you all to like whatever configuration you could think of, wherever you think would work, like feel free to try it out or like to reach out to us and say, hey, what do you think of us applying in this way? And maybe we want this lead organization, and we'll definitely make sure to get back to you all on that. But we recognize that success really varies and that we may not what we might think would look like a good project may actually be different. So yeah, that's just a little bit of information around like tips and things to be on the lookout for. But I would just say, always reach out. We are here to be a resource and just to be helpful. And we're really, really excited about this project when you really want to succeed and see a really cool organization or a group of organizations leading this work. So tips around the budget. They should be developed for the length of the contract. If you're applying as one org, you'll only need to use the budget label lead applicant. If you're doing like multiple orgs, please like detail out the individual budgets. You can budget out by an hourly rate or FTE depending on your structure, but please be sure to read the instructions. The one thing I would also say that is not included on the slide, but I'll make sure to really note it as well in the RFP itself, is that we really, really want to make sure that you all are compensating young folks for their time if they're participating on this project. So what I would say to this is that please make sure that you're building in youth incentives and stipends as well. And I know looking at the budget, it could feel like this doesn't feel like quite enough, but I have worked on projects similar to this. And I can promise that oftentimes the best way to really be able to utilize our resources is to kind of build on these existing structures. So I'm not saying you have to create a whole new group of young people and a whole new cohort and bring in all new staff that you don't already have. It might be that maybe you already have a group of young people that you work with who would be amazing at leading this project, and it's just a new thing that they're working on. And that helps to address any barriers that might be in the way. But we welcome flexibility. It doesn't have to be this brand new group in order for you all to apply. And so we also offer technical assistance. And so the things to know about TA assistance is that they are around, but however, roughly around 5 days before the RFP, they may not be able to get back to you in time to support. So I would make sure to time things just so that you can actually get support. The TA consultants, they generally reply within 48 hours. So I would say just message one person. If they don't respond to you within 48 hours, then you can always try to reach out to another TA consultant or reach out to me or Aaron if you have any questions or need help in some sort of way. But we do have them as a resource. They are built in to any VSK RFP application and they love helping. We all want to make sure that we're supporting you all. So please, please reach out if you have any concerns or questions, or if you just need like ideas or brainstorming and trying to figure out how to look at this RFP. So TA assistance is not grant writing, but they do help with like just reviewing the application and editing and budget review and all those other little pieces. So in terms of additional resources, the next info session for this will be on August 16th. That date is not set in stone. It might shift. So I would encourage you all to just stay up to date on our funding calendar so that you can know if any dates shift. We also make sure to post things on our blog as well. And there is a link on how to subscribe to our blog at the end of this presentation that I'll get into. Also, please be sure to use that checklist as well for your applications. Sometimes people might forget like a small piece and that can disqualify them. And I really don't want that to happen for a really good proposal. Because sometimes it happens. We have a lot of things that we're managing. We're busy. I know it's summer, some folks have kids, like maybe you're trying to parent while also simultaneously working, and that's a lot to manage. And so just be sure to use the checklist so that you can make sure that you have everything for your application and that you're not forgetting any details. Because sometimes we do forget things. And maybe we wrote an amazing narrative section, but we forgot a piece about the budget. And I wouldn't want that to happen because I definitely want everyone to have access to these funds and to have a chance to have their application reviewed. So that's just some of the background, but that's it. That's all I had in terms of this particular RFP. We will be releasing it over the next few weeks, but now is the perfect time to ask any questions, any thoughts, concerns you may have, because we're still in the middle of designing this. We're actually in the middle of the work group phase for this particular RFP, so it is still very much a work in progress and not set in stone in any kind of way. But what questions do folks have? And it could be related to your organization, could be comments, just any clarifying things. And it's okay if there are no particular questions. One thing I would say is that I encourage you all, if your organization's not interested, if you know of other orgs who you feel like would be a great fit, definitely let them know about this opportunity and that is coming up. I think it's an amazing chance for us to really see some really good work and to really be able to engage in youth-led projects, but specifically being social media focused. And so if anyone wants to learn more about other funding opportunities that we have coming out, or just to stay up to date on our opportunities as they're being released, you can scan this here. You can also follow our blog just to stay up to date. And once again, this is being recorded. So if there are any details that you may have missed or that you can't quite remember, you're always welcome to come back and look at this recording, since we'll be sending it out as well. But I just want to say thank you all so much for joining and for just giving me some of your time. And I hope that you all have a good rest of your days.
Thank you.
Let me go and stop this.